Daniel, who, over 30 years later, still struggles to comprehend what happened to him as a child. When Daniel was 10 years old, he spent his summers at his wealthy grandparents' massive beachfront property, a place that served as a communal retreat for his father's large family. His dad was one of 9 siblings, meaning there were always aunts, uncles, and cousins filling the house. Among them was Uncle James, Daniel's favorite relative by far. Unlike some of his other family members, Uncle James was warm, funny, and incredibly easy to talk to. He was also a licensed therapist and psychiatrist, which made Daniel trust him even more. In fact, Daniel confided in his uncle more than he did in his own parents. But that summer, something changed. Daniel began experiencing disturbing nightmares, vivid, terrifying dreams that seemed to have no pattern, just a constant sense of loss, fear, and deep psychological distress. At first, he tried to ignore them, but after several nights in a row of waking up in a cold sweat, he decided to tell Uncle James, hoping for guidance. His uncle listened intently, taking notes in a small notebook as Daniel described the nightmares. Then, with a concerned look, he suggested something strange, that these dreams were the result of unresolved resentment toward his parents. Daniel was confused. He loved his parents and had never felt any deep anger toward them. But Uncle James was a professional, so Daniel assumed he must be right. His uncle advised him to try an experiment. For the next few days, he should argue with his parents, say no more often, and push back whenever possible to see if the nightmares stopped. Daniel hesitated, but agreed, desperate to rid himself of the constant terror in his sleep. For 3 days, he acted completely out of character, arguing with his parents over the smallest things. His mom and dad grew concerned and eventually sat him down, telling him they didn't like his recent behavior. Daniel felt horrible. It killed him to upset them, but he was willing to do anything to end the nightmares. The problem was, the nightmares only got worse. They became more graphic, disturbing, and inescapable. Defeated, he returned to Uncle James for help again. This time, his uncle was hesitant, as if what he was about to say crossed a line. But after some pleading, he finally told Daniel that his brain was too mature for his young body and needed to be set free. Daniel didn't understand what that meant, but the way his uncle said it sent a chill down his spine. He was terrified. His uncle then told him that if he had one more nightmare, he would explain exactly what he needed to do. That night, Daniel went to bed scared out of his mind, but for the first time in weeks, he woke up before the nightmare could start. His heart was racing, but something felt off. He lay still in bed, staring at the wall, unable to shake the feeling that he wasn't alone. Then, he heard it, a whisper right next to his ear. It was Uncle James. Daniel froze in fear, too terrified to move. He finally turned his head and screamed, and his uncle stumbled backward before quickly fleeing the room and shutting the door behind him. For a moment, Daniel thought he might still be dreaming, but the terror in his body was all too real. Instead of going back to sleep, he ran to his parents' room and told them everything. The nightmares, Uncle James's therapy, and the chilling moment he had just experienced. His father didn't hesitate for a second. He stormed into Uncle James's room and confronted him immediately. Uncle James denied everything, but Daniel's father was enraged and physically overpowered him, grabbing the satchel his uncle carried everywhere. In a fit of panic, Uncle James gathered his belongings, rushed out of the house, and sped away in his car. What Daniel's father found inside the satchel made his stomach turn. There were pages and pages of notes about dreams, nightmares, and methods of psychological manipulation. Some were handwritten observations, others were printed articles about inducing nightmares and controlling dreams. It was deeply disturbing. The police were called, and after further investigation, they found even more horrifying material on his computer. Things that confirmed his true intentions were far worse than just dream analysis. Daniel never saw Uncle James again, and his parents never spoke about him afterward. He doesn't know exactly what happened to his uncle, but he assumes he was arrested or fled to escape justice. Even now, as an adult, Daniel sometimes blames himself for not realizing what was happening sooner, but deep down, he knows it wasn't his fault. What still haunts him the most, though, is one unanswered question. What exactly did Uncle James mean when he said Daniel needed to set his body free? Hit subscribe and don't dare miss what's coming next. Or the next scream you hear might be your own.